long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Joki. I hope you all had a safe and wonderful New Year's Day. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jack McCurry of the North Coast Sports. How you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing well, man. Like you said, Happy New Year to all our listeners. We hope you all had a safe one, and we're here to break down the end of the Browns season and get into the coaching search.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. We were going to do a pretty massive episode, but we're going to split it up into two parts. In our next one, we're going to do a season review type podcast, but in this one we're going to talk about the final game of the season against the Baltimore Ravens, and we're going to get into the head coaching search and all the candidates that have been named so far. There's been quite the laundry list of names that have surfaced in reference to this coaching search, so we'll talk about all those guys here in a few minutes. But we went into last week with very high hopes. Going into the Ravens game, we thought that the Browns would win that game. They definitely played their butts off. They ended up losing 26-24. Steelers fans were really bummed out, and it breaks my heart that they missed the playoffs. But those fans were wishing the Browns would be able to pull this one out against Baltimore, and they almost did. Baker Mayfield had another hell of a football game. He's the third quarterback to throw for over 300 yards against that Baltimore defense. Patrick Mahomes did it, and Baker Mayfield did it back, I believe it was week 6. So, he was able to tear up that Baltimore defense. But when it mattered the most, the Ravens had a game-sealing interception on a heck of a play. I think it was Mosley that had that interception. And I'll tell you what, Jack, when you look at Baker Mayfield and the way he finished out the season, he wasn't going down to fight, and boy did they fight in that game against Baltimore.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was times in that game where you thought Baltimore was just going to put it away, but how the Browns have performed during the second half under Greg Williams and Freddie Kitchens, they fought, and every time Baltimore threw a punch, the Browns would throw a counter right back at them. And watching those final couple minutes, the Browns got the ball back down too. I thought, first of all, I was pacing around my room because I was so nervous, even though the Browns weren't in like a position to go to the playoffs with this. It was just, the first winning season potentially since 2007. And just watching this, I'm thinking like the Browns are going to do it. Some of the plays down the stretch, Perriman's dragging his feet on the sideline on a spectacular catch, Jarvis Landry with a spectacular catch. And then, the offense momentum stalled. And then that final play, like you said, Mosley, was able to jump up and pick off Baker, which was his third pick of the game. But, just watching the Browns fight all the way to the very end, when 8 weeks ago, a lot of us thought that they were just going to pack it in with the coaching change, I'm still proud of that team, the way they played down the stretch. It's not the same old Browns, and very optimistic about this team heading into 2019 and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. Baker played really well once he was able to get in there against the Jets, and the rest of the season, there's no doubt in my mind that he's Rookie of the Year. There's been a lot of talk about Saquon Barkley, but when you look at the work that was done this season, I don't think any rookie had greater impact than Baker Mayfield did on the Browns. There's a complete shift in the culture of the Browns once he started to play against the Jets. And I was there in that Jets game. You could just feel the energy shift. And once it shifted, the rest of the season, was incredible to watch with him. And, like I said, there's no doubt that he's Rookie of the Year in my mind.
Yeah, definitely. I know the debate's going on in the national media between Mayfield and Saquon Barkley, and we've debated it here. But, you look at the complete body of work and what they've done for each team. And while Saquon Barkley put up amazing numbers, he's the third, I think, running back to have over 2,000 yards from scrimmage in their rookie year. You got to look at the quarterback and what Baker's done for the entire Browns organization to go from 0-16 to 7-8-1. It's the biggest turnaround in franchise history. And, with the NFL pretty much centered on quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield should be the Rookie of the Year, but it's going to be close. And I think my brother was the one that tweeted this out. He goes, I wouldn't mind seeing Baker lose this award because we know how Baker is and how he just uses it as fuel and motivation. Baker could come out and say, okay, I wasn't Rookie of the Year. I'll show the whole football world, and maybe he goes out and has a Patrick Mahomes type season in 2019 and wins MVP and then silences all his haters.
The thing with Saquon for me is that there were multiple weeks where he just was, I don't want to say non-existent, but it kind of seemed that way. And with the way Baker was able to play for pretty much the whole season, he played in 14 games. So, I tell you what, to me, it shouldn't be a contest. But when you have a rookie like that in New York City, obviously it's going to be a lot closer than you expect. But we had our own rookie running back who had a hell of a season, and it's a shame because Nick Chubb did rush for 1,000 yards, but a couple plays later, he was stopped for a couple of losses, and unfortunately he fell, I believe it was at 996 yards for the season. So when you look at Nick Chubb, what he was able to do this season, Jack, obviously he became full-time starter back in week 7. So for him to put up pretty much 1,000 yards in 10 weeks of the NFL season, that's a heck of an accomplishment in his own right.
Yeah, definitely. He did take over in week 7, and from that point on, he was second in the National Football League in rushing yards. I'm pretty sure it was Ezekiel Elliott was the only other running back that had more than him. But, yeah, he had a fantastic year. I'm sure he's kicking at himself that he didn't get 1,000 yards. I know he had a couple solid runs early on in the game, and then the Ravens just shut him down and forced the Browns to throw it. But, Chubb had a great year. I'm sure he's one of these guys that, takes what he did and he's gonna feed on it, and he's gonna motivate him even more to work harder this offseason. And Joel Bitonio told reporters on Monday, he goes, we're ticked that Chubb didn't get 1,000 yards, so we told him we're going to make sure he gets 2,000 next year. And I think Chubb can definitely be a running back that can get you 1,500, maybe even 2,000 yards, just because of how hard of a worker he is and what he does on the football field. He keeps his legs churning on every run. I expect he's going to have another monster year, and I think he's going to have a solid career as a running back.
And if Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley didn't have their heads, where he might have had 1,500 yards this season. And to really wrap up the stuff with Nick Chubb, this to me is one of the most impressive stats I've read. Chubb averaged 4.4 yards after first contact this season. That's the best clip by any running back with at least 75 carries in a single season over the last 12 years. So we made mention of it plenty of times where when Chubb makes contact, he's always moving forward, and he never seems to get pushed back. And I think that really tells the whole tale of how effective he was this season. Jack.
Oh, I thought you were just gonna jump to the next time.
It's all right, no big deal. New Year, same gas with us. That's all right. It happens. We're always good for at least one in every episode. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about the game. And there were, as there seems to be every year, there are a couple instances in the game that really didn't go our way. And one was down on the goal line. I forget who the running back was, but for Baltimore, the running back dove towards the end zone. The ball got knocked out of his hands, and it should have been a touchdown for Jabril Peppers on the run back, but the referees blew the play dead, and obviously once they blow the play dead, there's nothing you can do about it. The ball was short of the goal line when it happened, and it should have been a touchdown for the Browns, but it's just another case of another referee screw up for the Browns this season.
Yeah, I mean, it was Lamar Jackson. You know, he was trying to dive over the goal line, and the thing was, if you watch the replay, he did like the if you've seen Drew Brees make the dive, and he tries to just extend his arms over the goal line just to get the ball across. And what happened was Lamar Jackson tried to tuck it back in. Well, when he tucked it back in, Ogunjobi smacked the ball and it ricocheted back to the 7-yard line. Well, the refs blew the whistle and called it a dead ball, or they called it a touchdown. But that's the thing that I don't get with these referees. All scoring plays are reviewable. So I don't know why they would immediately blow the whistle and call the play dead when it's got to be reviewed regardless. And, you know, it cost the Browns a touchdown. Granted, they got the ball back and they could have scored a touchdown anyways, which we'll get to in a moment. But, you know, it could have been a defensive touchdown. The momentum could have completely shifted. It would have been, I think, 20-10 at that point. But, you know, and I know that everybody wants to say that the refs are screwing Cleveland. No, if you look across the league, the refs are making mistakes all over. And, you know, somebody brought it up that a crop of the veteran referees retired, and now there's a whole new crop of young officials. You know, something's got to be done. The officiating needs to get better, especially with legalized gambling becoming more of a thing. A lot of people are going to get mad if their money that they think they're going to win or think they're going to lose, it's just going to shift, and it's going to cause a major rift with gamblers, and it's already causing a major rift with fans because they're ticked off. Players are ticked off. I'm sure, you know, team executives and owners are ticked off that it's costing them games and potential playoff spots and situations like that. Something's got to give because it's not happening with just the Browns. It's happening all across the league, but it's happened a few times with the Browns this year. The Oakland game, I can think of another few instances, but, you know, this one here, you know, it obviously played an effect on the Browns game and could have put us in a situation where we should have beat Baltimore, but here we're talking about a loss.
Yeah, you know, you referenced the Oakland game too. I don't understand why referees just don't let the play happen. Obviously, when there's a turnover, the play is automatically reviewed. When there's a scoring play, the play is automatically reviewed. So if you let it go, you'll be able to figure out exactly what happened, you know, in terms of replay. So I don't know why they just don't let those plays go and figure it out later. I think there would be a lot of issues settled by doing that, but it is what it is. You know, it seemed like this season, you mentioned it happened all across the NFL. You know, not only are these teams playing, you know, the opposing team, but it seemed like certain cases that they were also playing the referees as well. And it's the whole NFL product, to me, you're not paying attention to the players on the field. You're not paying attention to the plays that have happened. As soon as the play is over, like a big play, you're waiting to see, was there a flag? Is there a flag on this play? You know, you're anticipating a flag on pretty much every single play. And to me, that's just destroying the NFL product. And you have two new football leagues that are opening up. I want to say, I know the XFL, but I can't remember the name of the other one. You know, these two leagues have already said that they're going to, you know, not call as many penalties. Now, these two leagues won't overtake the NFL for popularity, but it could make the games a lot more watchable.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're seeing more football leagues being established, like you said, the XFL. I think the other one's the Alliance of American Football or something to that effect. It starts in February, right after the Super Bowl. So, obviously, yeah, they're not going to tolerate these poor officiating calls, and like I said, the NFL needs to fix it because it's making games unwatchable because it's aggravating fans that their team's being screwed. I know there's the theory out there that the Browns are being screwed by the NFL. It's not just the Browns, but it's becoming a trend across the league, and something that needs to be done for it to be fixed.
And you referenced one more play, the Jarvis Landry play, if you want to go into that one in detail.
Oh, yeah. I mean, right after, they turned the ball over, they said the Browns got the ball on the fumble. And then, there was a passing play, and Baker threw it deep, and Jarvis Landry was wide open. There was no one around him within, at least 5 yards, maybe even 10. And the ball bounced off Landry's helmet. He should have caught it. It would have been a 93-yard passing touchdown. Would have made the game 20-10 or 20-14. I can't remember the score exactly off the top of my head, but that's just a situation where one thing goes wrong for the Browns, and a few other things went wrong. And of course, the Browns ended up scoring at the end of the half on a field goal, or no, they missed a field goal. So it was just a situation where the Browns could have went in. It would have been 20-14 at halftime instead of 20-7. And then who knows what would have happened in the second half of the game. The Browns could have built on that. But, Landry's got to catch the ball. I think, some people have said he's been a disappointment. I would say he has been to a degree. But he's got to catch the ball. He's had some drops, big-time drops in games this year. Didn't seem like him and Baker were on the same step in terms of chemistry. But, those plays like that, when you're wide open by that much, you have to catch the ball and you have to haul it in for a touchdown because, it was like the Browns playoff game. And if that was a legit game to get into the playoffs and Landry did something like that, he would not be a favorite of the Browns fans right now.
It's funny because this is almost back-to-back years where you had a Browns wide receiver kind of blowing a wide-open catch. Last year you had Corey Coleman, blowing that catch that sealed the 0-16 season. So that's 2 years in a row, Week 17, that they've had one that should have been caught go the other way, unfortunately. In terms of our defense, Lamar Jackson had a heck of a game running the football. The Ravens were extremely successful running the ball. Why do you think that was? What did the Ravens do so well in terms of running the football to continuously gash the Browns defense throughout the entire game?
I mean, it's what they've been doing these last 7-8 games since Lamar Jackson had taken over at quarterback. And I think it was Jake Burns brought up the great point during the game on Sunday that, they're pretty much running what the 49ers were running in 2011, 2012 when Kaepernick took over for Alex Smith, that read option offense where they were just pounding it up the middle and running the football down teams' throats. And it is pretty much like watching, I think it's like Army and Georgia Tech. They run those triple options. Like, it wasn't just Lamar Jackson. It was Gus Edwards. It was Kenneth Dixon. They just took the ball and ran it down the Browns' throat, and that's what they've been doing against teams. They've had 5 games where they've had at least 200 yards rushing, 4 games where they've had 242 yards or more running the football. Sunday they ran for almost 300 against Cleveland. They just took it, ran it down their throat. Now, in the second half, the Browns seemed to limit it more and were plugging up the middle. They really could have used a guy like Danny Shelton or Jamie Meter in that instance because maybe the rushing yards would have been down more than they wouldn't have given up as much as they did. But, they seemed to catch on and made adjustments in the second half, but still, it was really tough. And I think that's why, Baltimore's been so red hot down the stretch and why they're in the playoffs and why they won the AFC North. They have taken Lamar Jackson or using him to his strengths. He's not the best thrower. He can make solid throws. He did that on Sunday against the Browns. But, of course, he has that running ability, and along with Edwards and Dixon, they used it to their advantage against the Browns, and it worked.
I don't think that offense that they're running is going to last. He's going to have to learn how to throw a football. They're not going to be able to do that for the next 3 to 5 years and expect him to stay healthy. To kind of prove something I've been saying for pretty much the whole season here, you could really see the defense get tired, and obviously they need to address the depth across linebacker and the defensive line. And when you have games like this one against the Ravens, that's definitely going to help that. You can see the need for a 3-tech on the defensive line. You can see the need for a linebacker. You can see how much they miss Christian Kirksey in the running game. So when it comes to this offseason, I think D-line and linebacker depth is probably going to be top priority on this team. And now that you have the quarterback, which we've been looking for a long time, now that we have that guy, it's going to be going into this offseason without having to worry about that being a non-issue for the Browns is absolutely wonderful. Do you have any more thoughts about this game before we move on?
No, we're good.
All right. Well, let's get into the head coaching news. And as we've currently, it is 8:55 p.m. on January 2nd, 2019. And what we know so far is that Greg Williams and Jim Caldwell have both interviewed for the Browns head coaching job. Mike McCarthy, Dan Campbell, and Brian Flores will all interview on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, respectively. Let's see here. Kevin Stefanski, who's the interim Vikings offensive coordinator, will interview with the Browns on Monday. And so far, Dave Taub, Eric Bieniemy, and Josh McDaniels have not been asked to interview yet for the Browns head coaching spot. And at some point, Freddie Kitchens will interview. John Dorsey said that in his press conference that he earned that right. So when you're looking at this head coaching search and where it is right now, what's your overall viewpoint of what's going on?
Well, they talked about this, I think, starting last week. Some of the national reports, they said the Browns were going to take this search and do a wide cast of it. They were going to pretty much leave no stone unturned. As you can see by the list, if you haven't even seen it yet, you can go to the northcoastsports.com. It's no shameless plug there. I have the coaching search tracker on there, and I'm keeping it up to date if any new names appear or any new updates emerge. They have at least 10 candidates, maybe even there might be a couple more that haven't even been leaked to the media. Although the team is confirming once these interviews are done who they've interviewed and everything, but it looks like they're looking for the best guy. They're interviewing former head coaches. They're interviewing offensive-minded guys, defensive-minded guys. They're looking at position coaches. Mike Munchak's been mentioned as a potential candidate. He's the offensive line coach. He's also been a former head coach. Dan Campbell's right now the assistant head coach of the Saints and the tight end coach, but he's also been an interim head coach at one point. He was the interim coach of the Dolphins. But they're looking at all options. They're looking at guys that have only been coordinators. This could be their first year. Nick Sirianni of the Colts, Matt Eberflus of the Colts. I think this is their first year as offensive and defensive coordinators, respectively. They're getting interviews for head coaches. So John Dorsey is leaving no stone unturned. He's going to look at every option possible, I think. I also think that some of these guys that are mentioned, there's a chance they might not even interview them. They've been linked to the job, but Dorsey might find the guy this week and say, that guy's going to be our next head coach, or this could go on another 2 or 3 weeks and he interviews even more candidates. Obviously, some of the guys they can't interview right now because their team is in the playoffs this weekend. They can't interview those guys yet. So I like this approach. They need to go out and find the best guy. And if you interview all these people, then you're going to find out, hey, we liked these certain guys. We appreciated sitting down with these other guys, but either A, they're not the best option for us, or B, they're just not ready yet to be a head coach. So I like the approach, and hopefully it turns out that the Browns find the best guy. I don't care if it's a offensive-minded head coach or if it's a defensive-minded head coach, or maybe they turn around and interview Dave Taub, who's a special teams coach. Just go out and find the best guy that's going to lead the Browns organization for the next at least 5 years, but hopefully maybe 10 or 15 years.
Absolutely. And there are a few guys on this list that you could consider are controversial candidates. There seems to be the biggest split among Browns fans between Mike McCarthy, Josh McDaniels, and Adam Gase. When you look at those three guys, Jack, what are the pros and cons of each, and why do you think that they're extremely controversial between the Browns fans?
With McDaniels, obviously, there's a lot of people that, don't like the arrogance to him. They don't like the situation that happened with the Indianapolis Colts last year. And, honestly, I can see that. You accept the job, and then at the last minute you back out and say, I'm not ready for this. I want to go back to New England. Yeah, that's going to rub people the wrong way. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at Josh McDaniels, and I wrote about this on my website, when you look up the term young offensive-minded head coach, or young offensive mind, or young offensive guru, Josh McDaniels is probably, his picture should be right next to that definition. You look at what he's done in New England. You look back 10 years ago when he was hired to be the coach of the Denver Broncos. He was that young offensive guru that people wanted to get their hands on, and Denver did. Denver gave him too much power, and it backfired. He traded Jay Cutler. He traded Brandon Marshall. He drafted Tim Tebow in the first round. But when I look at him, and I said it on Twitter today, got some flack for it, but I really don't care. I like Josh McDaniels, and I don't care who they hire, but my preferred choice would be him, because A, offensive-minded head coach. B, I like the arrogance to him. I look at him as the offensive version of Bill Belichick, and that obviously he's not had the results that Bill Belichick had as a head coach. But if you look at the first time they were head coaches, Belichick with the Browns, McDaniels, even though it was a short stint with the Broncos, they weren't winners, but they were building something. Belichick didn't get to see it out with Cleveland. McDaniels obviously didn't get to see it out in Denver. Maybe McDaniels' second time as a head coach, he turns into something. Obviously, he's not going to have full control here. And then I think Albert Breer has mentioned it. He just wants to be able to pick his own staff. I don't think Indy was giving him that option. I'm sure John Dorsey would let McDaniels pick his own coaching staff. I don't think he'll try to force anybody on him. I know a lot of people want him to keep Freddie Kitchens, but I think when you're a head coach, you should be able to pick the staff and who you're going to work with. So when I look at McDaniels, he would be my number one option. And then I know you mentioned Adam Gase. I think a lot of people see Adam Gase and they ultimately think that that's Jimmy Haslam stepping in and saying, this is the guy I want to get. And I know the last couple coaching searches, that's been Haslam's number one target because it's been a recommendation of Peyton Manning. When I look at Adam Gase, I think he's a good young I think he's a good coach, offensive coach, quarterback coach. He had some success in Miami. Obviously, he had success in Denver, but he had Peyton Manning there as quarterback. And he had success in Chicago with Jay Cutler for one season. But is he a leader of men? I would say no. You look at some of the former players, Jarvis Landry included, they did not like Adam Gase. They didn't like how he ran things. So while he's a good offensive coach, is he a leader of men? I would say no. But obviously Haslam has that endorsement from Peyton Manning. And I think that if they did interview Adam Gase, which it doesn't look like they're going to, it tells me that the Haslams are letting Dorsey run the search. But if Adam Gase does end up getting interviewed, it makes you wonder if the Haslams kind of step in and say, Dorsey, we don't like your options, so we're going to go after who we think is the best choice.
What about Mike McCarthy?
Well, Mike McCarthy, I think we've talked about him a couple times on this episode or on this podcast. You look at his credentials, his resume, great resume, was Packers coach for 13 years, went to the playoffs numerous times, won a Super Bowl, offensive-minded coach, obviously. But you look at it, he never adapted his offense with the times as offenses have evolved during the last 13 seasons. Obviously, the relationship with Aaron Rodgers wasn't strong. You look at Aaron Rodgers and see some of the wasted years of his prime. Granted, some of those were injuries, but like the offense, they didn't mold the offense or didn't tinker with the offense ever. And that makes you wonder, is he going to come in and run that same offense in Green Bay that just kind of stalled out and never took the big step, and Rodgers never won more Super Bowls? So I would think Dorsey's going to grill McCarthy on these issues on the interview and be like, are you going to adapt your offense to fit what's right for Baker Mayfield, or are you going to try to run that same offense? Granted, I think Baker can adapt to any offense, and with his processing, he'll be able to study that playbook, learn that playbook, and I think he can execute it. But if he can't, and McCarthy don't adjust to Baker's strengths, then is it going to hold down Baker's development as a quarterback? I mean, he had a great rookie year, but if he doesn't take that next step the way a Patrick Mahomes did, or a Carson Wentz did, or a Jared Goff, like, is Baker's career going to be tarnished because of Mike McCarthy? That's my only concern with him, is if he's not willing to adapt his offense to the times. So what's with RPOs and everything that's been changing in NFL offenses, is McCarthy going to be the right fit to be the Browns' next head coach?
Talking, there's a couple more names that we haven't mentioned yet. Albert Breer was on a Cleveland radio station today, and he said that Matt Campbell is still in the mix. Now, he did sign a contract extension with Iowa State, but it appears that he still might be in the mix. When you look at Matt Campbell, Jack, do you think that smoke can turn into fire with the Browns?
Yeah, I mean, his name's been floated around since the day Hugh Jackson got fired. I think Albert Breer was on Bull and Fox that day, and he mentioned Matt Campbell. He mentioned Josh McDaniels as potential candidates. The thing with Campbell is there's a $7 million buyout, and you have to look, if you're an NFL team that wants to hire him, you're going to have to pay $7 million to buy out that contract at Iowa State. And then what are you paying him to come coach an NFL team? I mean, I think Hugh Jackson was making around $4 or $5 million. So you're looking at potentially paying Matt Campbell for your first year, 12, 13, maybe even $14 million to come out of college to coach in the NFL. I like Matt Campbell and everything that I've read about him so far and what he's been able to do at Toledo and Iowa State. I just don't know if he's ready for the NFL quite yet. Maybe he needs to get a bigger college gig, maybe take a step from Iowa State to a more prominent program like a USC, or, maybe even Michigan if Harbaugh is on his way out in the next year or two. I definitely wanted Campbell as an option for Ohio State in the instance that Urban Meyer was going to leave. But obviously they went with Ryan Day. But, with Campbell, I think he may be ready for the NFL. I just don't know if he's ready now. Maybe he needs another year or two in the college ranks just to be sure.
Speaking of college coaches, we just talked about Matt Campbell getting an extension. Lincoln Riley, Baker's former head coach at Oklahoma, just got an extension as well, and it appears that he won't be going anywhere this offseason. So, Jack, when you look at all these guys that we've somewhat gone over so far and talk about briefly, who would you rank as your top three choices for the Browns and why?
Put me on the spot. If I had to go top three candidates, I'm going Freddie Kitchens number one, just because the work he's done with Baker Mayfield and this entire offense, and I think he's got the NFL coaching experience to where I think he's ready. I know a lot of people are saying, well, he's only been offensive coordinator for 8 games. He's coached practically every offensive position. And I think that if he continues to flourish as the Browns offensive coordinator or going anywhere, he'll be a future head coach. And why not go ahead and take that chance and make him the head coach now? Number 2, I would say Josh McDaniels, even though he's not a legit candidate. I know Jason La Canfora suggested that the Browns could interview him this weekend when they interview Patriots defensive coordinator Brian Flores. So I still think McDaniels has an outside chance, and he would be my number 2 option. And then number 3, I would say Mike McCarthy, even though I'm not a big McCarthy fan. I just think that relationship he has with Dorsey and Wolf and Highsmith makes him one of the top contenders. And then you obviously look at the resume that he's done as an offensive play caller, as an offensive-minded head coach. But like I said, he's got to be willing to adapt and be able to adjust his offense to play to Baker's strengths, because what you've seen in Green Bay the last couple years, it really wasn't working. So, yeah, I mean, McCarthy's up there, but he's not my top choice. But honestly, like I said, I just want the Browns to hire the right guy. Who would be your top 3 choices, Anthony?
If I had to rank them, I almost forgot to unmute myself again. If I had to rank them, I would say Freddie's number 1. For me, this whole list is going to be offensive guys, because I think that's where this team is at. You look at the Rams and you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, and having offensive guys as your head coach right now, I think is the best thing you can do. And when you have a young quarterback, having an offensive-minded head coach to pair with that young quarterback, I think that's the way to go. So for me, Freddie's number 1. Number 2, I don't know how many Browns fans are going to like this, but I like Adam Gase. He's done a lot with very little down in Miami. I think he maximized as much talent as he could out of Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, they're in a tough division with the New England Patriots, so it's not easy playing down there. And there were a couple times he got their number, so I think he's a good head coach. It's just the expectations were very high down there, and the injuries caught up to that team with Tannehill and whatnot. So to me, I think he's a very good head coach, and I think on his second stop, he's going to do very well, and I think that could be here. My third guy, I think it would have to be McCarthy. He is a very good offensive mind, but like we've talked about, he has to adapt. There's things that he's going to have to do offensively to keep up with the trends, and there are a lot of free yards in the NFL, and in terms of jet sweeps and stuff like that, and he really hasn't seemed to do much of it in Green Bay over the last few seasons. Granted, before this year, he really didn't have much of a running game, so I don't know how much it really affected things. And for most of this year, Aaron Rodgers was hurt as well, so obviously that was a factor in things getting stalled out quite a bit. But if he's going to get the job here, he has to prove to John Dorsey that his offense is going to evolve, and hopefully he can do that if he gets hired here. To me, those are my 3 guys. Do you have any reaction to that, or should we move on here?
No, I mean, you can't go wrong with any of those choices. Obviously, I don't think Gase is going to be an option unless they has him step in like I suggested. But, I'm glad we both agree that Kitchens is our top choice. But it'll be interesting to see if Dorsey thinks Kitchens is ready for this. But I'm sure we'll find out in the next week or so.
Yeah, if you had to put a timetable on this, Jack, what would your timetable be for them hiring a head coach? Do you think it's going to be before the end of the week? Do you think it's going to be early next week? Late next week? What do you think?
I'm going to say the end of next week. I think they'll go through and interview all these candidates. Like I said, obviously there's guys they can't even interview this weekend because of playoffs. And I'm sure there might be other guys that we haven't even heard about that they're going to interview. So I would pinpoint it as they'll probably go through all these choices, and probably by the end of next week, we'll probably have our next head coach. If not, then it's obviously going to drag into the middle of January and maybe go into late January. I know the Mike Pettin search took to the end of January. So like Dorsey said, he goes, there's no timetable on finding this. They just got to make sure they find the right guy. So at the end of the day, I think that's what we all want.
And do you think the Browns are going to be the first team that have head coaching vacancies to get their head coach? Are they going to be the top choice out of everybody?
I think they're going to be the top choice. I mean, you look at everything that's here already. We already have an established young core of talent. We have, we're going to have pretty close to $100 million in cap space again. We have a front office that knows how to find talent, and I think it's apparent of what they did during the offseason last year, and what they did during the season as well, finding guys like Perriman and Robinson. Do I think they're going to be the first job filled? No, I would expect, Cincinnati, I think they'll get that wrapped up quickly. I think the Jets are being aggressive and trying to find their guy quickly. So, there's a lot of good options out there, and I'm sure a lot of teams aren't going to mess around and they're going to try to find that next guy rather quick so that they can get the staffs filled out and have everything ready before they have to get prepared for the draft and free agency and all that.
And just let it be mentioned that today the Cincinnati Bengals interviewed Hugh Jackson, so we'll see how that one goes. All right. Well, as we wrap this up here, today on social media, it's been kind of fun. For those that haven't heard, last week Antonio Brown was said to have a knee injury, but he was in fact kind of suspended for the last game because he went AWOL after reportedly having a blow-up with Ben Roethlisberger early last week in preparation for their final game. So today on social media, Jarvis Landry has started to recruit. He said that he needs to have a three-way FaceTime call with both Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. And then he started going after or talking to Odell Beckham Jr. Again on Twitter. Do you think Jarvis Landry, I'm not saying these players specifically, but do you think Jarvis Landry is going to be extremely crucial? I won't say extremely crucial, but a factor in the Browns' free agency plans and being able to get players here? Because, he mentioned on Twitter today that if you're feeling unappreciated, to come to Cleveland and to win a championship here.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that don't like Jarvis Landry. They don't like how much money he's making. They don't like the production on the field. And I said this, I think it was a week ago, to Pete Smith, who's a guy on Twitter, hasn't been the biggest Jarvis Landry fan. We know he's good buddies with our friend Jeff Lloyd, who hosts Locked On Browns. I told him, I said, Landry's overpaid. I think we can all agree with that. He's not worth $15 million because he's not a number one wide receiver. But, he is a vital part of the organization. He's not just a go-to target on offense, but, he's one of those locker room leaders. You've seen that speech on Hard Knocks, and you've seen like the fire that he brings on the field, the juice. They call him Juice Landry for a reason. I also think he's been a part of the culture change in Cleveland. The trades that they made, the free agent signings they made in the offseason. He was that first big one that they made. And he's come in and he goes, I don't worry about the targets. I don't worry about the numbers. I just want to win. You want guys like that. Yeah, he might be feeling on the inside, I should be getting the ball more, this and that, but he wants to win. And I think that's a big thing. And you've seen he's been trying to recruit Odell Beckham here. Now he's recruiting Antonio Brown here. He's trying to recruit Le'Veon Bell here. He tried to recruit Dez Bryant here. I think he is a vital part of the Browns organization because he was one of the top players on another team, got sent to Cleveland at a time when Cleveland was the laughingstock of the league. They were called a dumpster fire. And he's been a part of that culture change, that culture shift where, the Browns aren't the same old Browns that they've been the last 20 years, and that the tide is turning and the Browns are going to be contenders next year. And I think Jarvis Landry is going to be a big part of that. And I think he's going to be a vital recruiter to getting guys to come here and being part of the change, the turnaround that is the Cleveland Browns.
You mentioned his leadership, and you saw it not only at Hard Knocks, but even before Hard Knocks with the all-season workouts. And I'm just thinking about how this year they're not going to have Tyrod Taylor out there with those all-season workouts. They're going to have Baker Mayfield, and if they're able to get all those guys together and do a good job, and maybe recruit some more guys to come to the Browns. It's kind of hard with guys under contracts because of trades and whatnot. But if he's able to recruit a couple free agent wide receivers or another tight end or another running back or even guys on the defensive side of the football, I think it's going to be extremely beneficial to this team if he's able to get that done, and I think he can get that done. All right, Jack. This was kind of a rough one. We had two minor guests, but it's a new year, and they happen when we record. But is there anything else that we want to talk about before we get on out of here?
No, I think we covered everything. We got an exciting offseason ahead, Anthony. We're not the perfect podcast, but we do love our Browns, and we're looking forward to what it should be an exciting offseason as the Browns are taking the next step forward into playoff contention and AFC contention, and it's going to be a fun ride, man.
Absolutely, and no podcast is perfect, so I like to say that we are the perfect imperfect podcast, Browns podcast out there. So, hopefully you guys appreciate listening to us. And Jack, if you want to go ahead and plug everything you need to plug before we get out of here.
Yes, I will. As always, follow me on Twitter at jmccurrycle. Check out my site, thenorthcoastsports.com, for all the latest on Cleveland sports as well as Ohio State coverage. Going to be busy, as always. Had a busy day on New Year's Day, writing some articles on Ohio State's victory of in the Rose Bowl, some of the coaching staff changes that are already going to effect under new head coach Ryan Day, as well as coverage of the Browns coaching search. So check out thenorthcoastsports.com.
Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We would absolutely appreciate it if you do that. You can find our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can find ours, and obviously you're listening to it somewhere. But we have all those platforms available to you. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and on Facebook at 1085 Gridiron. And finally, you can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. And with all that, as we head into the offseason with, I think we tagged last offseason as the most important offseason for the Cleveland Browns in quite some time. And I think you can put that tag on this offseason for the Browns as well, especially with where they're at with their franchise quarterback and all this cap space and the draft picks that we have, I think, and obviously the head coaching search as well. So not only was last offseason important, but I think this one's even more important. And we'll be here to cover all that. And as always, as we get on out of here, go Browns.